She had the clipboard, the badge, and 18 months of stolen authority. What she didn't have was the legal expertise to recognize who she was really messing with. Picture Karen Blackwell filming my arrest poolside, her vanilla perfume thick enough to choke on while my 8-year-old daughter pressed her face against the chain-link fence. The metal handcuffs clicked around my wrists as chlorine stench mixed with her overwhelming satisfaction. "Officer, this man refuses to follow community rules despite multiple warnings about trespassing." But here's the beautiful irony. While Karen was busy playing suburban dictator with her HOA president powers, she'd been unknowingly targeting the senior consultant who manages HOA oversight contracts for the company that built her precious community. For 3 years, I'd held audit authority over every decision she'd been making. I smiled directly into her iPhone camera. "Karen, you might want to check who has final approval authority over Riverside Heights before you post that video." Her expression cracked like ice in spring sunshine. What would you do if a bully had no idea they'd been harassing their own boss? Drop a comment from wherever you're watching, and tell me your worst HOA nightmare. Let me back up 2 years to when I thought Riverside Heights was paradise. I'm Marcus Rivera, former Army logistics officer, now a community development consultant managing HOA contracts across 3 counties. After my wife Elena died 3 years ago, I wanted the perfect place to raise my daughter Sophia. This subdivision looked ideal. 847 homes, community pool, playground, $180 monthly HOA fees that seemed worth it for a fresh start. Then I met Karen Blackwell. Picture a 52-year-old real estate agent driving a white BMW with Blessed One plates, wielding her HOA presidency like a weapon. Karen had this gift for showing up with her clipboard, measuring grass height with an actual ruler, always referencing property values and maintaining standards. I noticed immediately how she questioned guest privileges for darker-skinned residents. Pure coincidence, I'm sure. Our first collision happened at Sophia's 8th birthday pool party. 8 kids from her class, normal birthday fun, until Karen's sandals crunched across the pool deck. "Excuse me, Mr. Rivera, I need guest registration forms. New rule, all pool guests require 48-hour pre-approval for safety and security." When I pointed out this wasn't in our HOA documents, her smile turned razor thin. "As president, I have emergency authority. That's a $200 fine for unregistered children." The other parents packed up immediately. Nobody wanted drama at a kid's party, and I watched Sophia's face crumble as her friends left early. "Daddy, why is the mean lady making everyone go home?" That night I pulled out the HOA bylaws, occupational hazard, I actually read legal documents, and found 0 mention of emergency presidential powers or guest registration requirements. But Karen was just warming up. The next week began her wellness checks. Daily walks past our house, photographing mailbox angles, trash can placement, house number positioning. Then came the passive-aggressive notes about property maintenance standards. My bird feeder became unauthorized exterior decor. My lawn edging was inconsistent with community aesthetics, and our house numbers had non-compliant font sizing. 3 separate violations in 2 weeks, all perfectly documented within her presidential authority. The pattern became clear. Karen Blackwell had weaponized HOA bureaucracy, and somehow my family topped her target list. She'd time her walks to coincide with Sophia's school pickup, always with that phone camera ready. The vanilla scent of her overwhelming perfume would hit you from 20 feet away, mixed with the smell of fresh-cut grass and her particular brand of suburban tyranny. What I didn't understand yet was why she'd chosen us. I paid my fees on time, kept our lawn pristine, followed every rule in the actual bylaws. But Karen wasn't interested in rule followers. She wanted rule questioners gone. Young families, military veterans, anyone who might actually read those 23 pages of governing documents and realize half her emergency measures were complete fabrications. The harassment escalated systematically. She'd park outside our house during Sophia's playdates, timing how long guest cars stayed parked. She installed a security camera that somehow always seemed angled toward our driveway. When Mrs. Bennett came to babysit, Karen would emerge with her ruler, measuring property line distances and muttering about suspicious activity patterns. 3 months in, I realized this wasn't random HOA overreach. This was targeted psychological warfare designed to make us move. Karen had perfected the art of making life miserable while staying technically within her authority. She'd identified every gray area in our governing documents and exploited them ruthlessly. But here's what Karen didn't know about me. I'd been dealing with petty tyrants my entire adult life. The Army teaches you patience, documentation, and strategic thinking. And my day job, I literally wrote the playbook for HOA management across 12 different communities. I understood these systems better than most attorneys, and I'd seen every power abuse trick in the book. Karen thought she was playing chess with an amateur. She had no idea I'd been studying her moves from day one, building a case file, waiting for her to overreach just enough to justify what I was planning to do next. Karen's first major offensive came disguised as parking enforcement, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. No announcement, no board meeting, just $50 fines appearing on windshields like parking tickets from hell. Her new rule, guest parking limited to 2 hours on weekdays. Of course, she forgot to mention this to anyone until after collecting her first round of penalties. Mrs. Bennett got hit first, my elderly neighbor who babysat Sophia twice a week while I handled client calls. Karen must have been timing with a stopwatch because she nailed Mrs. Bennett's Honda at exactly 2 hours and 1 minute. The crunch of gravel under Karen's speed-walking sneakers told me she'd been surveillance ready, waiting for this moment. The violation notice was bureaucratic poetry. Violation, unauthorized extended guest parking. Second offense, fine. $150. Second offense? Mrs. Bennett had been parking there for 6 months without incident, but apparently Karen kept detailed logs like some suburban prosecutor building a case. When I knocked on Karen's door that evening, her vanilla air freshener assault nearly knocked me backward. "Oh, Mr. Rivera, the parking situation, I presume?" Her freezer-burned smile was already in place. I asked where this 2-hour rule was documented, since I'd read our governing documents thoroughly. "Well, as I explained at the emergency board meeting," she started. "Which emergency meeting? I'd attended every session since moving in. It was called to address our parking crisis," she deflected. Here's where my Army logistics training kicked in. I'd learned years ago that bureaucrats always have a weakness, and it's usually their own rules. From my professional experience managing HOA contracts, I knew board members can't invent parking restrictions during secret sessions. Any rule changes require formal board votes with 30-day resident notification periods, not suggestions, legal requirements. But Karen was gambling that nobody would know their rights well enough to challenge her. "I'd like those meeting minutes and the 30-day notices you sent residents," I said, pulling out my phone to record. Her vanilla cloud seemed to thicken with her rising panic. "I don't appreciate doorstep interrogations, Mr. Rivera. These matters go through proper channels." Perfect. She'd just admitted she hadn't followed proper channels herself. "You're absolutely right about proper channels. See you Thursday when I present this to the full board." Thursday's HOA meeting felt like a military tribunal. Karen sat fortress-like behind her clipboard wall, but I noticed her hands trembling as she shuffled papers. The community center's musty coffee smell mixed with fluorescent lighting created perfect suburban courtroom ambiance. I'd prepared like briefing a colonel, printed bylaw sections highlighted in yellow, timeline of Karen's enforcement actions, photos documenting her surveillance activities. 20 years of military service teaches you that documentation defeats desperation every time. When my turn came, I stood with the calm confidence that comes from knowing you're absolutely right. Section 4.3 of our governing documents requires formal board votes and 30-day resident notices for parking restrictions. I'm requesting documentation of both for this 2-hour guest limit. Karen jumped immediately. "I have emergency authority for safety measures when property values face threats from excessive guest traffic." I asked her to show me where the bylaws granted emergency parking powers to presidents. Silence. The kind that makes fluorescent lights sound deafening. Furthermore, I continued, producing my evidence folder, 17 parking fines totaling $850 have been issued for a rule with no legal basis. I'm requesting immediate refunds and formal apologies to affected residents. Karen's face cycled through several colors. This is clearly a coordinated attack on legitimate governance. Mr. Rivera seems determined to undermine community safety through legal technicalities. I smiled. Exceeding authority and collecting money through invalid enforcement isn't a technicality. That's closer to extortion. The word hung like smoke. Other board members shifted uncomfortably while Karen's clipboard trembled and her desperation mixed with vanilla perfume created an almost toxic atmosphere. "I move to table pending legal review," she announced in a higher pitch. Janet Walsh seconded, clearly wanting this over. But damage was done. As residents filed out, 3 families approached quietly. Mrs. Bennett wasn't Karen's only victim. She'd systematically targeted military families, elderly residents, single parents, anyone vulnerable to harassment. That's when the pattern clicked. Karen's parking scam was systematic elimination disguised as rule enforcement. She wasn't randomly power tripping. She was strategically removing residents who might actually read those 23 pages of governing documents and realize half her emergency measures were complete fabrications. Young families with time to attend meetings, veterans who understood proper procedures, anyone who might question her authority faced escalating harassment until they moved away. But Karen had made one critical miscalculation. She'd targeted someone who'd spent 15 years writing the playbook for exactly these situations. In my professional work, I'd seen every HOA power abuse trick imaginable, and I knew that bullies like Karen always overreach eventually. The key was patience, documentation, and letting them hang themselves with their own rope. Karen's next move was pure criminal genius, disguised as community safety. Mid-July, peak swimming season, she sent a single emergency email at 11 p.m. Pool closed indefinitely due to critical structural integrity concerns. By morning, orange safety cones surrounded our perfectly functional community pool like it was a crime scene. The smell of hot concrete and chlorine hung in the dead air while kids pressed their faces against the locked gate, watching their summer die. Here's what made this brilliant. Karen had found her brother-in-law's contracting company, Blackwell Property Solutions. And suddenly our pool needed $8,000 in emergency repairs that couldn't wait for board approval. The timing was surgical. Desperate parents would agree to anything during a Texas heat wave that made stepping outside feel like entering hell's front door. At the emergency meeting, Karen played the liability card like a master. One child injury could bankrupt every homeowner here. I cannot expose our community to lawsuits. The musty fear in that stuffy community center made rational thinking impossible. But I'd spent 15 years reviewing municipal pool contracts, and this stank worse than the chlorine-soaked towels rotting in my car. Blackwell was billing $2,000 for concrete surface restoration, pressure washing, another $3,500 for filtration system optimization, replacing 6-month-old filters. The remaining $2,500 covered safety compliance upgrades, so vague they could mean golden pool noodles. When I requested contractor licenses and the inspection reports that triggered this emergency, Karen's assistant claimed they were being processed by the county. Translation: they didn't exist. From managing recreation facilities across 3 municipalities, I knew pool contractors need specific state certifications. 30 seconds of Googling revealed Blackwell Property Solutions had a basic business license but 0 pool maintenance credentials. They were landscapers with delusions and a family connection. The real kicker? While researching Blackwell, I discovered Karen's real estate company had hired them for property staging improvements. The same month our pool mysteriously needed emergency repairs. I filed a public records request with the county health department, knowing pool facilities require permits for major work. Surprise? No permits filed for Riverside Heights, but here's what made my blood boil. In Texas, any HOA expenditure over $5,000 legally requires board approval with competitive bids. Karen had violated state contracting laws and our governing documents in one spectacular family business scheme. 2 weeks into the heat wave closure, kids were melting and parents were mutinous. The local public pool looked like a refugee camp, with Riverside Heights families packed like sardines. Karen kept promising repairs would be completed soon, while her brother-in-law's crew showed up sporadically to pressure wash already pristine concrete. The sound of their equipment echoed across empty pool decks where children should have been playing. That's when I called County Inspector Rodriguez directly. His confused response told me everything. "Sir, we have no record of safety violations at your facility. Who said the pool was unsafe?" Within 48 hours, Rodriguez showed up unannounced while Blackwell's crew was optimizing filtration, which looked like hosing down clean equipment. 20 minutes later, Rodriguez issued his verdict. This pool is in excellent condition, no safety issues, no permits required for the cosmetic work being performed. Armed with the inspector's report, I called another emergency meeting. This time I brought the full paper trail. County's clean inspection, evidence Blackwell lacked proper licenses, proof Karen exceeded spending authority, and a timeline connecting her real estate staging contracts to our pool repairs. The community center's vanilla air freshener couldn't mask Karen's rising panic as I laid out her family business operation. "This is coordinated harassment," Karen announced, her voice hitting notes that made fluorescent lights vibrate. Mr. Rivera is sabotaging legitimate improvements through frivolous regulatory interference. But when board member Janet Walsh asked to see the original inspection report that triggered the emergency, Karen suddenly remembered another appointment and fled like the building was on fire. The pool reopened the next day. Blackwell's final bill mysteriously shrank from $8,000 to $3,200. Apparently those critical safety repairs weren't so critical after all. But I'd learned something crucial about Karen's operation. This wasn't random power tripping. This was systematic theft using HOA funds as her family's personal ATM. Every emergency conveniently benefited businesses connected to Karen. Every crisis required contractors who happened to be relatives. Every solution lined pockets while residents paid the bills. The pattern was clear now. Karen had turned our HOA into a money laundering operation disguised as community management. Pool repairs, landscaping contracts, security upgrades, all flowing to family businesses through manufactured emergencies that bypassed normal oversight. She'd found the perfect crime. Steal from your neighbors while convincing them you're protecting their property values. But Karen had made one fatal error in her calculations. She assumed residents would never question authority figures or understand the legal requirements governing HOA operations. She'd targeted the wrong guy, someone who'd spent years writing the exact procedures she was violating, someone who knew every loophole she was exploiting, someone with the patience to let her dig her own grave one fraudulent contract at a time. Karen's patience evaporated after the pool humiliation, replaced by pure vindictive fury. If she couldn't steal money through fake repairs, she'd steal access to everything we were paying for. New pool rules appeared overnight like gang tags. Disruptive residents subject to amenity suspension pending board review. Of course, disruptive meant questioning Karen's authority or encouraging neighbors to read actual governing documents. The mechanical thunk of laminated signs hitting fence posts at dawn woke half the neighborhood. Karen had worked through the night. New restrictions posted at pool, playground, walking trails, even the dog park. All amenities now required good standing verification from the HOA office. Translation: Karen would personally decide who deserved to use facilities they paid $180 monthly to access. My family received special treatment via certified letter, temporarily suspended from all community amenities pending resolution of ongoing compliance issues. What compliance issues? Karen cited pattern of hostile behavior toward governance and incitement of resident discord through frivolous complaints. Apparently, requesting receipts now qualified as domestic terrorism. The harassment escalated beyond paperwork into full surveillance state territory. Karen installed a security camera aimed directly at my driveway, its red recording light blinking like an angry cybernetic eye. The mechanical whir of the camera tracking our movements became the soundtrack to our lives, documenting visitor patterns, building evidence for whatever legal assault she was planning. But 103-degree heat with humidity thick enough to chew finally broke my restraint. Sophia had asked for weeks why we couldn't swim anymore, watching her friends post pool videos while she melted indoors like a forgotten popsicle. I decided we'd use amenities we legally paid for, regardless of Karen's invented authority. Walking to the pool, Sophia clutched her purple goggles and chattered about practicing underwater handstands. The gate was unlocked, water sparkling like liquid diamonds under the brutal sun. For 10 precious minutes, my daughter got to be a normal kid in her own neighborhood. Then Karen materialized like suburban death itself, phone already recording before clearing the gate. You are trespassing on community property. Multiple warnings about your amenity suspension have been ignored. Her voice carried that righteous authority that petty tyrants spend decades perfecting. Karen, I pay fees like everyone else. Show me legal basis for amenity suspension. I kept my voice level while Sophia continued swimming, oblivious to the confrontation brewing around her innocence. Mr. Rivera, you're violating community rules and creating hostile environments. Leave immediately or I'm calling police. She practically vibrated with excitement at the prospect of my arrest in front of my daughter. Go ahead, call them. Karen's fingers attacked her phone screen, voice rising as she spoke to dispatch. I need an officer at Riverside Heights Pool. Aggressive male refusing to leave private property after being banned for disruptive behavior. She emphasized aggressive male, like reporting armed robbery instead of a father teaching his child to swim. Officer Davidson arrived within minutes, already primed by Karen's theatrical performance. She'd positioned herself for maximum authority, clipboard visible, HOA badge prominent, concerned citizen posture perfected. Meanwhile, I stood dripping in swim shorts while my daughter watched with growing confusion. "Sir, you've been asked to leave the premises," Davidson said, hand resting on his radio with practiced authority. "Officer, what legal authority allows HOA presidents to unilaterally ban paying residents from community amenities?" I pulled out my phone to record, knowing this conversation would matter later. Karen thrust a folder at Davidson like murder evidence. Repeated trespassing warnings, documented harassment, refusal to follow community rules. But here's what Karen didn't know about my background. From managing municipal contracts, I'd learned that most police officers understand property law better than HOA presidents think they do. "Ma'am, could you show me governing documents authorizing amenity suspensions without board votes or due process?" I asked, maintaining eye contact with Davidson. That's when Karen made her catastrophic error. "Officer, this man is clearly dangerous. Look how he's intimidating me with legal technicalities and recording devices. He's planning retaliation." The word dangerous hung like toxic smoke. Davidson looked between Karen's theatrical panic and my calm questions, then at my 8-year-old floating quietly with purple goggles. Something shifted in his expression, the moment when experienced cops recognize they're being manipulated. "Sir, do you have documentation showing current HOA fees and facility entitlements?" I handed him payment receipts and governing documents. Davidson spent several minutes reading while Karen's confidence deflated like a punctured pool float. Finally, Davidson looked up with the expression of someone who'd just realized they'd been played by a suburban con artist. "Ma'am, I don't see legal authority for unilateral amenity bans in these documents. Mr. Rivera appears current on all fees and entitled to facility access." Karen's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and panic as her perfect arrest scenario crumbled. "But officer, he's been warned multiple times about trespassing." Her voice climbed toward hysteria as control slipped through her manicured fingers. "Ma'am, if someone's paying legitimate fees for facility access, asking them to leave without proper legal basis could constitute harassment." Davidson's tone carried warning undertones that made Karen step backward. That's when I realized something crucial. Karen had just committed her first major tactical blunder. She'd involved law enforcement in her personal vendetta, creating official documentation of her abuse of authority. Every phone call, every false report, every baseless complaint was now part of a legal paper trail that could destroy her. That night, after Sophia finally fell asleep clutching her purple goggles like a security blanket, I sat in my home office surrounded by the musty smell of old files and cold coffee. Something about Karen's desperation felt familiar, like déjà vu scratching at the back of my brain. The computer screen's blue glow illuminated stacks of client contracts as I followed a hunch that had been nagging me since Officer Davidson's confused expression at the pool. Then I found it, and my entire world tilted sideways. Buried in my client database was Meridian Development Company, the master-planned community firm that built Riverside Heights. I'd been managing their HOA oversight contracts for 3 years, completely forgetting they retained legal authority over all their developments during the first 5 operational years. The irony was breathtaking. As Meridian's senior consultant, I had audit authority over every operational decision in communities under their umbrella, including the one where I lived. My coffee mug trembled in my hands as I pulled up the development agreements. Meridian maintained final approval over major financial decisions, contractor selections, and governance policies until December 2024, still 8 months away. Karen had been operating outside her actual legal authority for 18 months while I sat on the override codes, oblivious to my own power. Using my professional access to Meridian's financial systems revealed the scope of Karen's operation. This wasn't petty theft. This was sophisticated fraud disguised as community management. She'd perfected a double billing scheme, charge the HOA inflated rates for services, then receive referral fees from contractors who kicked back the difference through her real estate company's consulting arrangements. Every emergency, every repair, every upgrade generated profit while residents paid premium prices for bargain basement work. The financial damage was staggering. $47,000 in fraudulent expenses over 18 months. Pool maintenance contracts inflated by 200%, landscaping bills that could have bought a small car, security upgrades that consisted of Karen's nephew installing $50 cameras and billing $2,000 for comprehensive surveillance solutions. The pool closure wasn't about safety. It was perfectly timed to hide financial irregularities before the annual audit deadline. But here's what made my blood turn to ice water. Karen's unauthorized governance changes violated Meridian's operational requirements in ways that could invalidate our insurance coverage. If the insurance company discovered HOA operations outside approved parameters, they could void coverage retroactively. Every homeowner would face personal liability for accidents, lawsuits, property damage. Karen's power games weren't just stealing money, they were exposing 847 families to potential financial ruin. The weight of discovery settled on my shoulders like lead blankets. I could quietly fix this, remove Karen, restore proper procedures, recover stolen funds, protect my neighbors from liability. Simple, clean, effective. But scrolling through victim after victim in the financial records, I saw the human cost of Karen's systematic oppression. Mrs. Bennett paying $300 in invalid parking fines from her Social Security check. The Rodriguez family charged $500 for landscaping violations that consisted of children's chalk drawings. Young military families facing escalating harassment until they surrendered and moved away, forfeiting thousands in moving costs. Karen had transformed suburban governance into a protection racket, targeting anyone who might read governing documents or question her authority. She'd identified every vulnerable demographic: elderly residents, single parents, military families, and systematically extracted money through manufactured crises and invented violations. This wasn't random corruption. This was predatory capitalism wearing the mask of community leadership. The transformation was instantaneous and irreversible. I stopped being a defensive victim and became a strategic prosecutor armed with professional credentials, insider access, and 18 months of documented crimes. Karen had unknowingly declared war on the one person with both authority to audit her operation and expertise to dismantle it completely. The beautiful irony made me smile in the darkness. Karen thought she was bullying another helpless homeowner. She had no idea she'd been building her case against the prosecutor who would ultimately destroy her. My kitchen transformed into a war room at dawn, coffee brewing while I spread Karen's financial crimes across granite countertops like a detective planning the perfect bust. The rich aroma of dark roast mixed with the satisfying rustle of evidence that would end her reign of suburban terror. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived first, her retired paralegal instincts sharp as her morning espresso. "Marcus, I've been documenting Karen's shit for months," she said, dropping a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. 17 families ready to sign affidavits, and that's just the ones brave enough to talk. Jake Thompson from the Tribune practically salivated when I called with my opening pitch. HOA corruption involving federal contracting violations and systematic discrimination against military families. The scratch of his pen through the phone told me Christmas had come early for investigative journalism. Within hours, Dr. Kim joined our WhatsApp group, Riverside Residents for Fair Governance, 23 members by lunch, each sharing Karen stories that painted a masterpiece of coordinated financial abuse. The legal strategy crystallized beautifully around my third cup of coffee. From managing municipal contracts, I'd learned that HOA board members face personal liability when they exceed their authority, something Karen had been doing like an Olympic sport for 18 months. My formal audit request through Meridian Development would trigger automatic financial review that Karen couldn't block, delay, or bullshit her way around. The legal framework was poetry. Homeowners can force special elections with petitions from just 25% of residents, and all financial records must be accessible within 10 business days of written request. Mrs. Rodriguez proved invaluable for mobilization. Her paralegal background meant she understood resident rights that most people never discover until desperately needed. We drafted petition language demanding Karen's removal while she scheduled community meetings to present evidence publicly. "Honey," she told me over lukewarm coffee in the stuffy community center, "Karen's been counting on ignorance. Time to educate the masses." Jake's investigation destroyed Karen's contractor network faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. His press contacts confirmed none of Karen's preferred contractors maintained proper credentials for work they'd performed. Pool maintenance requires specialized certifications that Blackwell Property Solutions never possessed. They were basically landscapers with delusions and family connections. The security consultant billing premium rates, Karen's unemployed brother operating from his garage probably between beer runs and unemployment checks. My forensic accounting software revealed patterns that made professional blood boil. Every questionable transaction traced back to Karen's profit centers like a roadmap to corruption. Her real estate company had received $12,000 in referral fees from HOA contractors over 6 months. Brother-in-law's emergency pool repairs coincided perfectly with her company needing quick cash for a failed investment property. Every manufactured crisis generated family business profit while residents paid inflated bills for bargain basement work. Dr. Kim brought the safety angle that would resonate with parents and grandparents. His medical background identified real safety concerns Karen ignored while manufacturing fake emergencies. Playground equipment hadn't been inspected in 2 years despite monthly maintenance fees. Walking trail lighting was broken in 12 locations, creating actual liability that Karen's security theater completely ignored. The pool's real problem wasn't structural integrity. It was overcrowding during brief periods when fake repairs weren't blocking access. Community education became our nuclear weapon. I organized HOA rights workshops at the library, teaching neighbors legal procedures Karen had been violating systematically. Most residents assumed HOA presidents possessed unlimited authority instead of understanding they're essentially hired managers with specific, limited responsibilities. Karen's power came from ignorance. Time to illuminate the darkness with fluorescent legal knowledge. The technical trap required surgical precision. I knew Karen would attempt silencing opposition through emergency board meetings with manufactured urgency and minimal notice. My municipal bureaucracy experience taught me that board actions taken without proper notification are automatically void, something Karen would learn the hard way. I prepared documentation systems to record every procedural violation, building cases for wholesale invalidation of her recent power grabs. Media preparation exceeded local coverage expectations. Jake's connections included state reporters interested in HOA corruption, especially stories involving military discrimination and elder financial abuse. The narrative was journalist gold. Suburban president targets veteran families while stealing community funds through elaborate family business schemes. Visual elements were perfect. Karen's surveillance footage, photos of her measuring grass with rulers, documentation of demographic targeting that would make civil rights attorneys salivate. Personal motivation hit me every morning when Sophia asked about the pool. I wanted modeling for my daughter that fighting bullies requires patience, evidence, and strategic thinking rather than emotional outbursts. Karen represented every petty tyrant who'd abused authority over people, unable to fight back. This transcended recovering money or restoring pool access. This was proving that corruption crumbles when communities organize around truth and legal accountability. The endgame crystallized as Karen's next move became inevitable. She'd call emergency meetings to expel me from the HOA, probably attempting foreclosure for persistent violations. But I'd be ready with Meridian's authority, state regulatory backing, media coverage, and community support that would transform her triumph into public destruction. Karen thought she was playing chess with an amateur. She was about to discover she'd been building her own gallows while I supplied the rope. Karen's desperation hit full-blown panic mode when word spread about my community organizing. The acrid smell of fear mixed with her vanilla perfume cloud as she called an emergency board meeting with exactly 24 hours notice, legally insufficient but perfectly timed to ambush working families. Her proposed agenda made my morning coffee turn to acid. $500 monthly special assessment for enhanced security measures to combat escalating threats to community safety. The financial warfare was surgical in its cruelty. $500 monthly would price out every military family, single parent, and elderly resident on fixed income, exactly the demographics who'd been questioning her authority. Karen had found the nuclear option, make Riverside Heights unaffordable for anyone brave enough to read governing documents or attend board meetings. But desperation makes people sloppy, and Karen was hemorrhaging amateur mistakes. Emergency assessments required 7-day notification under our bylaws, and any fee increase over 25% needed 60% homeowner approval, not just board rubber stamps. She was so focused on eliminating opposition that she'd forgotten basic legal procedures, creating additional violations for my growing evidence file. Her panic peaked during our accidental encounter at HEB, where she ambushed me near the produce section with theatrical casualness. Fluorescent lighting made her makeup look like war paint, while frozen food aisle chill couldn't cool her rising desperation. "Marcus," she purred, blocking my cart with fake sweetness. "Perhaps we could resolve our past disagreements through mutual cooperation." The bribery offer was beautifully crude. my consulting company could receive significant monthly revenue from HOA maintenance contracts if I stopped organizing neighbors and withdrew audit requests. When I politely declined, her suburban soccer mom mask shattered completely. "Life will become very difficult for your family if these hostile activities continue," she hissed, voice dropping to frequencies that made nearby shoppers uncomfortable. The threat hung between organic bananas and locally sourced tomatoes like toxic waste. Thank God for Texas one-party consent laws, something I'd learned managing municipal contracts where recording conversations often meant the difference between successful corruption prosecutions and cover-ups. Karen's bribery attempt and criminal threats were now permanently documented on my phone's voice memo app, creating evidence that would destroy her if this ever reached court. The smear campaign launched within hours like a coordinated military strike. Anonymous flyers appeared everywhere. "Dangerous resident threatens community safety," featuring my photo and fabricated quotes about retaliating against legitimate governance. Karen's creativity was impressive. She'd invented entire conversations where I allegedly threatened elderly residents and plotted to destroy property values through frivolous litigation. Her Facebook offensive reached propaganda-level artistry. According to Karen's alternative reality, I was an outside agitator sent by anti-HOA extremist groups to destabilize peaceful communities through legal harassment. The irony was chef's kiss perfect, a woman embezzling community funds calling someone else an extremist. Her echo chamber of supporters shared these posts with religious fervor, creating manufactured outrage that would have impressed North Korean publicists. But here's where Karen made her catastrophic miscalculation. While she was playing social media warrior, real investigations were accelerating beyond her control. Meridian Development completed their audit, confirming $53,000 in financial irregularities warranting criminal referral. The state attorney general opened formal inquiry after receiving my documentation package. Jake Thompson's expose was locked and loaded for publication, featuring victim interviews and expert analysis of contractor licensing fraud. The counterintelligence revealed Karen's operation was more extensive than organized crime. Mrs. Rodriguez caught her opening residents' mail to monitor complaint patterns, a federal felony that postal inspectors take very seriously. Jake's editor received calls from Karen threatening advertising boycotts if the story ran. Her surveillance network included board spies attending my meetings, reporting attendance and discussion topics like suburban Stasi operatives. Then came the mini twist that changed everything. Karen contacted my professional clients directly, attempting to damage my consulting business through false claims about my aggressive behavior and legal troubles. But she'd targeted the wrong industry. Municipal contract managers talked to each other constantly, and word spread quickly about an unhinged HOA president harassing a respected colleague. Instead of damaging my reputation, Karen had inadvertently created a network of professional witnesses ready to testify about her retaliatory harassment. Her final desperate gambit crystallized predictably. She'd call a special meeting to expel me entirely from the HOA, claiming authority to foreclose on my property for persistent community standards violations. The beautiful irony was that I'd already scheduled my own special meeting through proper legal channels. 30-day certified notice, agenda including financial audit presentation, county officials and media confirmed to attend. Karen was dancing exactly to my choreography without realizing it. Every desperate escalation provided additional evidence for the public destruction I'd been orchestrating since that first pool party. She thought she was fighting for survival, but she was actually weaving the rope for her own hanging. The only question was whether her ego would recognize the trap before walking into it, or if her suburban dictator complex would drive her straight into the ambush where her empire would finally crumble. Karen's final gambit revealed the depths of her suburban sociopathy. At an emergency board meeting that reeked of desperation and burnt coffee, she unveiled her nuclear option, motioned to expel me from the HOA entirely and initiate foreclosure proceedings for persistent violations of community harmony clauses. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, while her vanilla perfume couldn't mask the acrid smell of pure panic. Her legal theory was fiction masquerading as jurisprudence. According to Karen's twisted interpretation, questioning board decisions violated deed restrictions about maintaining peaceful environments. She'd invented a doctrine where dissent equaled trespassing, financial transparency requests constituted harassment, and neighbor organizing was domestic terrorism. The woman had completely divorced herself from reality, but her board puppets nodded along like trained seals applauding their trainer. The foreclosure threat was masterfully malicious. Karen claimed my hostile behavior pattern had damaged property values and violated mortgage covenants, granting the HOA authority to force home sales. She'd consulted some bottom-feeder attorney specializing in HOA abuse because her documents looked professionally crafted to terrorize homeowners into submission. The psychological warfare was surgical. Threaten someone's home and watch them crumble under financial terror. But Karen's paranoia reached clinical levels with another police report claiming I was stalking her through systematic intimidation campaigns. Her evidence included edited security footage showing me walking past her house, conveniently omitting that I was escorting Sophia to the school bus stop on public sidewalks. Normal neighborhood activities had become criminal behavior in her delusional worldview, and the crunch of autumn leaves under my feet apparently constituted threatening behavior. Officer Davidson's return visit carried visible fatigue. His expression suggested he was tired of Karen's theatrical emergencies, especially after reviewing evidence of a father walking his daughter to school. "Ma'am, using public sidewalks isn't stalking, regardless of your comfort level," he explained with the patience of someone handling frequent false reports. But Karen's escalation had entered potential criminal territory. Repeated false police reports carry serious legal consequences. The intimidation campaign reached organized crime sophistication. Karen's allies visited elderly residents with warnings about property value destruction and legal liability if they supported my radical agenda. Mrs. Bennett received certified letters claiming her statements supporting me could make her accessory to community disruption charges. The psychological pressure was expertly applied, make people afraid to speak truth by inventing official-sounding consequences that were complete legal fiction. Karen's real estate network began spreading neighborhood destabilization rumors. Her professional contacts whispered about Riverside Heights becoming problematic due to ongoing litigation and resident conflicts, attempting to create self-fulfilling prophecies of declining values. She was willing to economically damage 847 families just to eliminate one threat to her authority, proving that her sociopathy knew no boundaries. Then Karen crossed the ultimate line. Anonymous reports to Child Protective Services about my fitness as a single parent and exposure of minor to hostile environments. The false complaints claimed Sophia was being exploited as a prop in adult conflicts and subjected to psychological abuse through community discord. She'd weaponized child welfare agencies against a grieving father protecting his daughter's future, the most morally bankrupt escalation imaginable. My documentation captured everything with forensic precision. Every threat, false report, and intimidation attempt was recorded, time-stamped, and witness corroborated. Karen's desperation had created a prosecutor's dream: conspiracy, harassment, false reporting, fraud, extortion. She'd built her own legal destruction while thinking she was eliminating opposition through superior tactics. The twist that sealed her fate came when CPS investigated. Caseworker Maria Santos was a seasoned professional who recognized manufactured complaints instantly. After interviewing Sophia, reviewing my documentation, and observing our home environment, Santos became genuinely angry about false reports wasting resources meant for actual child protection. Her report noted no evidence of neglect or abuse and apparent retaliatory motivation behind anonymous complaints. But Santos exceeded my expectations. Her experience with vindictive disputes made her recognize systematic harassment patterns designed to destroy families through bureaucratic warfare. She contacted the district attorney about criminal charges against whoever filed false CPS reports. Karen's attempt to weaponize child protection had backfired spectacularly. Instead of removing my daughter, she'd created federal evidence of harassment that could send her to prison. The pressure finally manifested in visible breakdown symptoms. Neighbors reported seeing Karen walking streets at night, photographing residents' vehicles and checking house numbers like some suburban intelligence operative. Her paranoia had reached levels where every neighbor was suspect, every conversation was conspiracy, every gathering was organized opposition to her crumbling authority. She was absolutely right, of course. But recognizing the coalition's scope came far too late for course corrections. Karen had pushed every button, crossed every line, and exhausted every desperate measure available to suburban dictators. The sound of her empire cracking was audible to anyone listening carefully, like ice breaking under spring sunshine, inevitable and irreversible. All that remained was the public reckoning I'd been orchestrating since that first humiliating pool party. Karen thought she was fighting for survival, but she was actually weaving the rope for her own execution. The gallows were built, the crowd was gathering, and justice was about to be served with compound interest. The Riverside Heights Community Center had never hosted a crowd like this. 85 residents packed into a space designed for 30, with the overflow spilling into hallways that buzzed with nervous energy and whispered conversations. The smell of industrial carpet mixed with nervous sweat and too many competing perfumes created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. Local TV news crews positioned cameras near the front, while Jake Thompson from the Tribune sat with his recorder ready, pen poised like a weapon of journalistic justice. Karen arrived fashionably late in her white BMW, stepping out like a queen approaching her coronation rather than her execution. She'd assembled her own war council, personal attorney, 3 loyal board members, and enough legal documents to choke a courthouse. Her vanilla perfume entered the room before she did, announcing her presence like a chemical weapon designed to claim territory through olfactory dominance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen announced, seizing control of the microphone with practiced authority, "we're here to address the ongoing disruption caused by certain residents who seem determined to undermine legitimate community governance through harassment and frivolous legal challenges." Her voice carried that special tone of righteous indignation that suburban dictators spend years perfecting. She attempted to control the agenda immediately, demanding exclusion of outside media and unauthorized officials from what she claimed was a private community matter. When County Commissioner Hayes' aide stood up to identify himself, Karen's face cycled through confusion, panic, and desperate calculation. "This is clearly an orchestrated attack on proper HOA procedures," she declared, but her voice hit higher notes that suggested her confidence was cracking. That's when I stood up and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for months. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcus Rivera, and I think it's time you all knew exactly who you've been dealing with." The room fell silent except for the mechanical whir of news cameras adjusting focus. "I'm the senior HOA compliance consultant for Meridian Development Company, the firm that built this community and maintains legal oversight authority until December 2024. The gasp from the crowd was audible, but Karen's expression was priceless, like watching someone realize they'd been unknowingly insulting their boss's boss for 18 months. Her clipboard trembled in hands that had suddenly developed a nervous shake, and the vanilla cloud around her seemed to intensify as stress sweat mixed with designer fragrance. "For the past 18 months, I've been documenting financial and procedural violations that could cost every homeowner here thousands in personal liability," I continued, producing the Meridian authorization letter that gave me audit authority. "We're not just talking about invalid fines and harassment. We're talking about systematic fraud that's put this entire community at legal and financial risk." The evidence presentation was surgical in its precision. Financial forensics showing $53,000 in unauthorized expenses and kickback schemes. Legal violations documented with timestamps and witness statements. Contractor fraud involving unlicensed work that voided insurance coverage. Personal retaliation campaigns against families who dared question authority. Each revelation hit the crowd like physical blows, and I could hear phones buzzing as residents texted updates to neighbors who couldn't attend. Karen's desperate counterattack revealed the depths of her delusion. "This is a coordinated conspiracy by outside agitators who hate successful communities," she announced, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "Mr. Rivera has been planning this attack since day one, using professional resources to destroy property values and undermine legitimate governance through legal technicalities and media manipulation." Her attorney tried physically restraining her from approaching the microphone again, but Karen's rage had reached levels where professional advice became irrelevant. "Officer, this man has been harassing my family for months," she told Officer Davidson, who'd arrived due to capacity concerns. "He's dangerous and clearly unstable. Look how he's weaponizing these people against lawful authority." The crowd's reaction was swift and brutal. Mrs. Bennett stood up with trembling hands, holding receipts for $300 in invalid parking fines paid from Social Security checks. The Rodriguez family displayed documentation of $500 in landscaping violation fees for children's chalk drawings. Young Father Jake Martinez described being banned from playgrounds for questioning maintenance costs while his kids watched through chain-link fencing. County Commissioner Hayes' aide announced formal investigation into HOA governance violations, while the state attorney general's representative confirmed financial crimes inquiry was already underway. Local news cameras captured Karen's attorney physically preventing her from making additional statements that would have created more evidence for prosecutors. The resolution vote was democracy in action. Emergency motion to remove Karen and her entire board, 73 votes in favor, 4 opposed. Appointment of interim management through my firm. Unanimous approval that sounded like thunder in the packed room. Restitution fund for invalid fines. $23,000 approved from HOA reserves, with additional recovery expected from fraud prosecutions. Karen's final moments as HOA president were captured in high definition as she realized her suburban empire had just voted her into oblivion. The woman who'd terrorized families and stolen community funds for 18 months was now facing criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the social death that comes with public exposure of petty tyranny. Justice had been served, and it tasted sweeter than victory. The morning after Karen's public destruction, the mechanical click of pool gates opening for the first time in months, mixed with children's delighted shrieks echoing across our liberated community. The smell of chlorine and sunscreen replaced vanilla perfume and fear as Sophia cannonballed into water that sparkled like liquid diamonds under Texas sunshine. Her purple goggles caught the light as she surfaced with a grin that erased months of disappointment, and I realized this was what we'd been fighting for all along. Karen Blackwell resigned via email at 3 a.m., probably her attorney typing while she sobbed into tissues soaked with defeat. Criminal charges followed within days: fraud, extortion, filing false police reports, and federal mail tampering for opening residence correspondence. Her brother-in-law's company refunded the full $8,000 in fraudulent pool repairs after their business license got suspended. The sound of justice being served never gets old. The transformation happened faster than anyone expected. Transparent financial systems replaced Karen's secret slush funds, with monthly reports posted online for every resident to review. Our new rotating advisory committee ensured no single person could accumulate dictatorial power again. HOA fees dropped $30 monthly once we eliminated kickback schemes that had been inflating every contract, and the collective sigh of financial relief was audible across 847 households. Mrs. Bennett's face when I handed her the $300 refund check reminded me why this fight mattered. She'd been choosing between Karen's bogus parking fines and grocery money, paying penalties from her Social Security to avoid harassment. The Rodriguez children celebrated by covering sidewalks with chalk masterpieces, rainbow declarations of victory over tyranny that made walking to the mailbox feel like strolling through an art gallery. My phone exploded with 47 inquiries from HOA communities across 3 states, all desperate for someone who understood the legal frameworks that could stop suburban dictators. Military Dad Destroys Corrupt HOA President became viral content that spawned dozens of copycat investigations. I'd accidentally become the patron saint of fighting back against petty authority, and honestly, I was here for it. The State Attorney General Partnership evolved into statewide HOA oversight training. Our workshops teaching homeowner rights, governance procedures, and corruption warning signs got adopted by libraries across Texas. Knowledge became the weapon that could prevent future Karens from terrorizing communities, and watching residents learn to fight back through education instead of intimidation felt like planting seeds of democracy. But the sweetest victory was watching Sophia's confidence return. She started questioning everything: why rules existed, who made decisions, how problems got solved fairly. My daughter was learning that democracy requires participation, that bullies crumble when communities organize, and that scary-looking fights become winnable when you understand the system better than your opponents. Those lessons would serve her better than any inheritance. The community garden bloomed where Karen's surveillance corner once festered, transforming paranoia into productivity through soil and sunshine. Families who'd been too terrorized to speak during her reign now organized barbecues, movie nights, and birthday parties that filled our streets with laughter instead of fear. The Riverside Community Scholarship launched with $15,000 annually for students pursuing public administration or law, ensuring future generations would understand governance well enough to prevent corruption. Karen's suburban empire became cautionary legend. Real estate license suspended 18 months for ethics violations, $34,000 in restitution payments, criminal trial scheduled for spring. Her white BMW with Blessed One plates disappeared along with the woman who'd thought intimidation was stronger than accountability. The for sale sign on her house became a monument to what happens when entitlement meets consequences. 6 months later, my phone rang with familiar urgency. Mr. Rivera, we need help with a contractor stealing from military housing. A base advocate described veteran families getting systematically overcharged through fraudulent repair schemes that diverted housing allowances into criminal pockets. Higher stakes this time. Service members facing financial devastation while contractors got rich off patriotic sacrifice. The crunch of gravel under my feet as I walked to that first client meeting reminded me that some fights choose you rather than the other way around. Karen had been practice. This would be war. Drop a comment telling me your worst HOA nightmare. I might be able to help you fight back with strategies that actually work. And smash that subscribe button to HOA Stories because next week, I'm taking on contractors who thought stealing from military families was easy money. Some people never learn that the person you're targeting might be exactly the wrong person to mess with. Sometimes justice tastes like chlorinated water and sounds like children laughing. And sometimes that's exactly perfect.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.